Translator, editor, Dark Gem. The sight within the city sent a chill straight into the bones. Before the insect army of Three Wonders Castle could even be deployed, it was swallowed by a surging sea of fire and swordlight, crumbling into drifting ash. The insect army of Three Wonders Castle was ferociously formidable. Yet because it had been struck unprepared, both men and insects alike were burned alive. Dying in the blaze, the female army of Passion Parting Palace was likewise terrifying in battle, but they too suffered a ruinous blow. Countless razor-sharp swords shot down from the heavens, piercing through their bodies. Riddled with thousands of holes, they perished while still standing. By the time their bodies finally toppled, the keen blades that had skewered them had already flown back, returning to the sword cases borne by the cavalry upon their backs. The entire rebel host, along with the disciples of each and every sect, had no time to respond before the infantry smashed them apart, forcing each to fight for their own life. However, no matter how lofty their cultivation, once they were hemmed in by the formations of Eternal Peace Empire's soldiers, their heads were severed in an instant. A sect disciple's battle power far surpassed that of a common soldier. Yet their coordination was wretched. A single charge scattered them. Of course, there were those within the rebel army trained to fight in concert, but they had been caught off guard. Once the host was broken, it was already too late to do anything. This was unmistakably a slaughter, accomplished through the surprise strike beneath the teleportation flags of Heavenly Devil Cult. For those who faced such a calamity, there was only one ending: utter annihilation. Upon the mountain, the bronze-masked man trembled all over. Two choices. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had offered them two roads. One was to be ground flat by Eternal Peace Empire's army. It would drive them to the South Sea and kill them to the last, for such was the Empire's rule. The other road was to follow the law of the martial world, challenge Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and fight to the death. They had always believed they would be forced to choose between these two paths, and had never imagined they would be made to face both at the same time. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor intended to beat them to death, while also eradicating the rebel army. When did Heavenly Devil Cult begin to rely on the Imperial Court? Passion Parting Palace Master shouted. When did the supreme sacred ground of the Devil Path become the dogs of the Imperial Court? Secrets of Hatred. Parting Heavenly Sword of Passion. Parting Palace demanded that the inner heart be emptied of emotion. No love, no hate, no passion, no enmity, so as to reach the highest state of mind within the sword art. Only when the heart held no foreign thing could it reflect others like a spotless mirror without flaw. Yet when Passion Parting Palace Master Chu Diei saw her disciples being massacred, her state of mind shattered. This was no trivial matter. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor perceived it at once, and the vital chi at his fingertips became a thread of sword light. It swelled explosively and, in the blink of an eye, had reached her throat. It was not only the heart of Passion Parting Palace Master that was in turmoil, but the hearts of all the others as well. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor struck at Passion Parting Palace Master, not one person managed to interfere. "We are going to die." This thought surfaced in the hearts of Chen Wanyun and the others. This mountain had been sealed within the 50 hectares of Heavenly Prison seal, so that pulses could not travel outward and would only rebound back and forth. The instant Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor clashed with them, they would be trampled into fragments. Before Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor could fully make his move, a gigantic flag appeared before Qin Mu and his companions, shrouding their bodies. With a jolt, the flag vanished, taking the people and the Dragon Qilin with it. In the next moment, Qin Mu and the rest appeared at the foot of the mountain. Chen Wanyun, Yun Kuei, and Yue Qinghong stared at the strange person beside them in the bamboo hat, who was unfurling the enormous flag once more. A few hundred strange people encircled this mountain in a ring, their huge flags billowing, covering the entire peak. An ancient voice rang out, "Go!" Swoosh! Several hundred flags snapped and swept through the air, and as they drifted past, the mountain beneath them vanished, along with those cult master-level existences, including Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Only a stretch of pale land remained where the mountain had stood. and upon the ground lay the crushed city lord's manor. Chen Wanyun, Yun Kuei, and the rest were dumbfounded as they watched those strange people raise their flags again, covering their own group. Before Chen Wanyun and the others could regain their senses, a huge flag wrapped over them. They felt the world spin, and then their feet were once again planted firmly upon solid ground. Only then did they see that they had already left the battle at Daxiang City, arriving instead on a nearby mountain peak. This peak soared extremely high. A fierce gale whooshed and roared, rustling their clothes. Beside them stood a few hundred strange people wearing bamboo hats. Chen Wanyun and the others suppressed the shock in their hearts and exchanged looks. They are strong practitioners of Heavenly Devil cult. What do they intend by kidnapping us? The incomparably mysterious Heavenly Devil cult was the #1 sacred ground of the Devil Path. This Devil Path Holy Land always acted in secrecy, and the Imperial Court of Eternal Peace Empire had investigated it many times, yet never uncovered much that could be deemed useful. For Heavenly Devil cult to aid Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor this time, and even to pull their small group out from the place where Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was battling, it surely had its own designs. Suddenly, the strange people removed the bamboo hats from atop their heads and performed the disciples' greeting, bowing toward them as they said in unison, "Subordinates pay respects to sacred cult master and saintess." Chen Wanyun and the others were at a loss, unease rising as they watched these Heavenly Devil cult powerhouses bow and perform the disciples' greeting. Monk Yun Kuei immediately shut his eyes and shouted, "I saw nothing! I didn't see your faces! Don't silence me!" At that moment, a familiar voice sounded beside them. "Rise! No need for formalities." "Thank you, sacred cult master." The strange people straightened, and Chen Wanyun and the rest stared at the speaker, faces full of astonishment. The first abandoned person to enter Imperial College, the first Imperial Academician of Imperial College, Qin Mu, was the Devil Cult Master of Heavenly Devil Cult? Qin Mu's expression was mild as he smiled at them. If Academician is the Devil Cult Master, then who is the Devil Saintess? Yo Qinghong asked, her voice trembling. Si Yunxiang smiled bashfully at her, and Yo Qinghong's hair stood on end. The Directorate of our Imperial College's Hall of Hidden Light, Directorate Jiansan Sheng, even Directorate Chen Yunting of Hall of Array Element. Chen Wanyun saw Sword Hall Master and Formation Hall Master, and his heart sank as he muttered, "We're definitely going to die. We're dead." Monk Yun Kuei shouted in fury, "You're definitely going to die after seeing their true faces. But why did you have to say their names too?" I closed my eyes, but now that I've heard their names, I'm going to die as well. Sword Hall Master swept a glance over the four of them and asked, "Sacred Cult Master, now that they have seen our true faces, should we silence them to be safe?" Monk Yun Kuei immediately opened his eyes and turned toward Qin Mu with a smile. "Academician, Sacred Cult Master, we're classmates, and you even beat me before. Have you forgotten? Sister Fox, remember how much money I've given you. Can you put in a good word for me?" Hu Linger tilted her head and wagged her tail, showing she was helpless. Qin Mu soothed them. "Don't worry, Scholar Yun. Everyone be at ease as well. There is still me. I'm here." He turned his head and said to Sword Hall Master, "Sword Hall, they are all my classmates in Imperial College. You can ask them if they are willing to join our sacred cult, and if they aren't, you can bury them in this place of verdant hills and limpid water." Qin Mu then turned back to comfort his friends. Don't worry, I'll settle this." Monk Yun Kuei was terrified out of his wits, his hair standing on end. Luckily, he was bald, or else even the hair on his head would have risen. Qin Mu turned back again and said, "Sword Hall, when you kill them later, don't do it in front of me. Wanyun, Qinghong, don't worry as well. We aren't ruthless villains like the others of the Devil Path. Put your heart back into your tummy. You'll be fine. Draw your sword faster and minimize their pain." "I've heard you." Monk Yun Kuei shouted, "Sword Hall, don't come over. I'm already part of the Devil Cult. Bah, part of the sacred cult." Yo Qinghong and Chen Wanyun looked at each other, and Yo Qinghong asked softly, "Big brother, what should we do?" Chen Wanyun hesitated briefly, then said, "For Heavenly Devil Cult to help Imperial Preceptor this time, it means Heavenly Devil Cult is part of the Imperial Court. There's nothing to lose by joining Heavenly Devil Cult. And if we don't join... His eyelids twitched, but he didn't say anything further. Yue Qinghong let out a breath of relief. There's nothing to lose in joining Heavenly Devil Cult. We'll join. Since she had spoken thus, the wolf slave naturally had nothing else to say. Yue Qinghong blinked innocently towards Si Yunxiang. Saintess, if we did not join the sacred cult, you all definitely wouldn't have laid hands on us, right? Si Yunxiang let out a soft laugh. Cult Master has a kind heart. He was only joking with you all. Monk Yunkui breathed out and muttered, This little monk knew it was a joke. Academician, you were joking earlier, right? Academician? Qinmu chuckled and said nothing. Yunkui's face turned ashen. Qinmu walked to the cliff and looked toward another mountain several miles away. That was where Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and the dozen Cult Master level existences were fighting. The heavenly prison seal, set up by the bronze-masked man and the others, had already been pierced through. Holes opened one after another. A terrifying storm poured from those gaps, forming violent gales that tore away patches of forest, sweeping countless trees into the sky and shredding them into splinters. The battle atop that mountain was too dreadful, a struggle of life and death between Cult Master-level existences. Even though they were so far away and there was a heavenly prison seal between them, a terrifying sensation could still be felt. Whoosh! Another gale swept past. And only then did Chen Wanyun and these others understand why the wind had been so fierce when they landed on the mountain just now. The gales here were in fact born from the battle several miles away. The wind's might grew stronger and stronger, forcing the trees on the surrounding mountains to bow. Gust after gust arrived. The instant one passed, another slammed in from a different direction. Trees that snapped back were bent again, while others broke clean in half. That mountain should have been shattered long ago. Qinmu saw the ground where those terrifying existences clashed, sinking lower and lower, until it was almost as flat as the plains. From so far away, Qinmu could observe the battle by using Green Heaven's eyes, but not too clearly. This was because the speed of those people colliding was far too fast, making it difficult for Green Heaven's eyes to capture traces of their movement, let alone their moves. Qinmu could only rely on the trails left by their motion to judge how many people remained on that mountain. Another Cult Master level existence has fallen. Qinmu's heart trembled slightly. Yue Qinghong looked around and saw that the strong practitioners of Heavenly Devil Cult stood upon the peak in silence, observing the distant battle. They showed no intention of going forth to assist, which left her puzzled. Aren't you all going to help? Nope. Qinmu explained. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor can settle this alone. The sneak attack of the 3 old monsters from the old generation could injure Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor when he was within an army of 10,000 men. If it were Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor doing the sneak attack, there would hardly be anyone who could match him. How our Heavenly Devil Cult can help him is to create the chance for him to make his move. The instant the sect masters lose their spirit, it is the best moment for Imperial Preceptor to launch a sneak attack. Translator, Ninetales. Editor, Dark Gem. Whether it was the #1 Devil Path cult lending a hand to Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor, or Heavenly Devil Cult using teleportation flags to shift the Eternal Peace army across leagues, the result was the same. By slaughtering every sect's disciples cleanly, they shook the hearts of all those at the cult master level, swayed their minds, and cast them into disarray. Though that chaos of heart did not last long, before an existence like Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, even that brief lapse was no different from placing one's neck beneath the blade. Those with cult master level strength were, as a rule, grand experts of the Divine Bridge Realm. Yet within Divine Bridge Realm, there were the weak and the strong. Just as Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had once said, he had no weakness in any realm. No matter how wide another's angles spread, their line could never be longer than his straight line. His cultivations stood above others, and his methods stood above others as well. With a strike sprung from concealment, there was essentially no one who could contend with him, nor even properly receive a single move. It was just like in Heaven Wave City, when Duqian Devil King fought Mute. Duqian Devil King had been slain in one blow, and that blow had been a sneak attack. Qin judged that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor could seize the instant those mighty practitioners' spirits faltered to wipe out 4 of them. As for how many more he could wound, that would hinge on Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's own prowess. Yet no matter how dazzling this clash was, displaying the splendor of the world's strongest powers, there were not many who could truly read the battlefield. Among only a few hundred onlookers, likely only the left and right guardians could grasp every movement each combatant made. Even among the hall masters of the 360 halls, not many could see the moves with clarity. Qin focused his gaze on the battlefield once more, but still could not make out the situation. He saw only after images left by bodies moving too fast, and the radiance flaring from divine arts and sword skills. From time to time, a streak of light would snuff out, signaling the death of a powerful practitioner. Now, only 8 figures remained. Other than Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, there are still 7 people. Qin eyes flickered. Those 7 should be the ones with the greatest ability. Yet which 7 were they? The ones still living? He could see godlike rays pouring off the moving figures, but could not distinguish who was who. If I can't see the battle's workings, am I not losing a tremendous opportunity? I wonder if I can awaken my Cyan Heaven's eyes. Qin stirred his vital qi, sending more of it into his eyes as he attempted to construct the formation markings of Cyan Heaven's eyes. Already there were 3 layers of pupils within his eyes. The first was his own pupils, the second was the pupils formed by Heaven's eyes, and the third was the pupils formed by Green Heaven's eyes. If he could form Cyan Heaven's eyes, that would become the 4th layer, letting him perceive even more. Just as he guided his vital qi into his eyes, he sensed a trace of something else slipping into his eyes together with his qi. Qin jolted, and in that instant, everything upon the battlefield became incomparably clear. He shook his head and looked again. The battlefield was still incomparably clear, and he had not even formed the formation markings of Cyan Heaven's eyes. There's someone else's eyes in my eyes! A bone-chilling cold ran down Qin spine. He could now see every movement and action Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor made, every layer of divine arts and sword skills, and even their inner structure. Every action and every expression was laid bare before his eyes. This was not what his own eyes could see, but what someone else's eyes could see. Or rather, someone was borrowing his eyes to observe the battle. Who was borrowing his eyes to watch this fight? He abruptly recalled Heavenwave City when he had summoned Dutian Devil King. Dutian Devil King's consciousness and magic power had used his body as a conduit to enter the Devil God sculpture, blasting open the heart of his brows. Sparks had flowed from the heart of his brows, surging into the Devil God sculpture as he executed Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. While circulating that technique, he had felt something enter his body, along with the circulation of vital qi. When the disciples of Great Mountain Sect arrived and used Devil Withdraw command, even if it could not drive Dutian Devil King back, Qin had clearly felt the summoning get severed the moment Devil Withdraw command shone upon Dutian Devil King's body. The consciousness and magic power that had been pouring out from his body had been cut off. That meant there was still a portion of Dutian Devil King's consciousness and magic power remaining within Qin body. In that case, the one staying in my body and borrowing my eyes to observe the battle is none other than Dutian Devil King. Qin felt a touch of terror. Where exactly was this portion of Dutian Devil King's consciousness hiding inside him? Why had he sensed no abnormality at all while cultivating Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique this entire time? What was Dutian Devil King plotting? Granny C had Devil Cult Master Li Tianxing inside her. If he ended up carrying Dutian Devil King within his own body, that would be an enormous joke. Qin kept silent. Letting Dutian Devil King borrow his eyes to watch the battle was, for Qin, a good thing. It allowed him to observe the battlefield situation and the divine arts unleashed by the experts, expanding his horizons by an extraordinary margin. What's in me is only a portion of Dutian Devil King's consciousness and magic power. No matter how strong he once was, he cannot be that strong now. As long as I can find him, I'll definitely be able to get rid of him. I must not alert him. I'll pretend I know nothing. At last, he could see the battle clearly. Eternal peace. Imperial Preceptor's swords were not physical blades, but swords condensed from vital chi, ever-changing, gathering and scattering as he willed. Flaming radiance raged around his body, as though he were a god, and Qin Mu remembered seeing that same kind of rays upon Village Chief's body as well. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor performed sword skills, even the simplest sword form appeared incomparably profound and marvelous. Within his sword skills were not only basic sword forms, but also computations and transformations even more intricate. Dao's Sword of Dao Sect? Qin Mu was stunned. Within Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skill, he could see the shadow of Dao Sect's Dao Sword, a technique of incomparably complex calculation. Take the yin-yang symbol as an example. Anyone could draw a circle, but not everyone could calculate the proportion the curved line separated within that circle. This was tied to Dao Sect's first form, the trick to yin and yang come and go within two modes. To accomplish the coming and going of yin and yang, the canon of supreme mystery was of utmost importance. Yin and yang, come and go within two modes, unleashed its greatest power when one calculated the endless numbers. If one wished to ascend to an even higher level, one had to compute all the way to the Sukong and Qingjing decimal. Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor has extremely deep attainments in mathematics. Qin Mu thought to himself, if I had known, I would have consulted him regarding the canon of supreme mystery when we were heading down south. The ones clashing with Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor were the three elders, Teacher Poor, Wanderer Li, and True Lord Tian. They deserve to be called the pinnacles among the old generations. The rays streaming from their bodies made them seem like three ancient gods, each with their own distinctive arts. The huge brush in Teacher Poor's hand looked like a brush, yet its bristles were long, so long it resembled a horsetail whisk. However, compared to a true horsetail whisk, it held fewer transformations. Wanderer Li was a sword cultivator who practiced sword skills. His techniques were exquisitely intricate, yet still inferior to Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptors. His sword skills were composed from the 14 basic sword forms, so though they were marvelous, they had already lagged behind the times. The age had moved forward, yet he remained standing in the same place. What True Lord Tian refined were venomous insects, forging them into all manner of bizarre dragons. For instance, a heavenly centipede dragon that stretched 300 yards, a heaven silkworm refined into a dragon silkworm, a green snake refined into a green flood dragon, and many other insects of peculiar shapes. Though these venomous creatures were formidable, they still rained down from the sky beneath Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skills, dying one after another. Qin Mu estimated that True Lord Tian would not be able to hold on much longer. Aside from these three, there were still 4 others. Among them was Chi Deu of Beggar Sect, whose 100-pore mystery technique was uniquely strange. His body could turn solid or become incorporeal at will, letting him appear and vanish without warning. 100-pore mystery technique meant that he possessed nothing at all. And it was an exceptionally rare kind of art. The other person who had preserved his life so far was Spiritual Master Dao Quan. His ability was the weakest among them, so it was hard to tell whether he had survived by his own means or whether Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had spared him. Perhaps not seeing him as a threat, the third was Venerable Ji Kong of Great Strength Monastery. The might of formation, existence, destruction, emptiness, 4 incantations mudra was extraordinary. Yet under Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor's sword, this senior monk who had attained his Tao was covered in wounds and had little strength left. The 4th was the bronze-masked man. His attacks were the most overbearing, and also the most puzzling to Qin Mu. That man mainly used divine arts, and when they burst forth, there would appear images of 9 dragons. Those images looked like 9 real dragons charging forward with awe-inspiring force. Within those 9 dragons were staggering transformations, offensive and defensive divine arts, arts that controlled fire and water, and arts that evolved yin and yang. The firepower could be both fierce and domineering, yet it was also full of change. Whether it was offense, defense, or even refining, the bronze-masked man could wield them at will. Moreover, he had cultivated until those 9 dragons had nearly gained physical form. 9 dragons monarch technique. This was the technique of the emperor's Ling family. Only those of the emperor's bloodline could cultivate it. Ordinary princes and princesses were not permitted to touch it at all. It was clear this bronze-masked man belonged to the royal family. Furthermore, judging from his cultivation realm, he should be one of the highest of the high within that royal clan. Even though his attacks were incomparably overbearing, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor did not kill him without mercy. It was difficult to say whether he had misgivings about doing so. Who is this person? Qin Mu was shocked. At that very moment, he felt a stir in his heart and looked to the west, only to see a gigantic apparition of a majestic mountain rushing over. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. This mountain was unbelievably vast, yet it was merely an apparition and not a real mountain, formed from the aura of countless monks with eccentric appearances. Mount Meru. That mountain apparition carried countless peaks of varying size, and upon each peak sat a monk in lotus position. There were also some standing and holding a jade vase, while a few others sat holding their bellies, grinning broadly. On the golden summit of the highest peak sat an enormous Buddha, blazing as though cast from pure gold. The 10,000 rays behind his head were incomparably resplendent. Great Thunderclap Monastery, old Buddha Rulai! Qin Mu's heart trembled violently. Great Thunderclap Monastery had arrived. Rulai personally led the guardians, venerables, bodhisattvas, and arhats of Great Thunderclap Monastery as they hurried here. What did he intend to do? At this moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also sensed something and suddenly struck with ruthless ferocity, slaying Venerable Ji Kong in a single attack. Right then, the strong practitioners of Heavenly Devil Cult also turned around and stared at the apparition of Mount Meru drifting over. "Bald donkeys!" Left Guardian sneered. "Bald donkeys!" Everyone shouted in unison. Monk Yun Kuei saw everyone calling the newcomers bald donkeys and forced himself to call them bald donkeys as well. After all, he was part of Heavenly Devil Cult now, even if he was a monk. The apparition of Mount Meru floated into the sky above them, and the guardians, venerables, bodhisattvas, and arhats upon the mountain all looked down together and coldly said in unison, "Evil creatures of the devil path!" Qin Mu revealed a strange expression. The relationship between our Heavenly Saint cult and Great Thunderclap Monastery seems to be a little strained.